and we're going to talk about how Californians participate in the democratic process. First, we'll talk about forms of participation in a democracy. Political participation is defined as an individual or group activity intended to exercise influence on the political system. We will quickly look at civic engagement and conventional participation. You see, California lags in non-electoral civic engagement. Only 8% work with neighbors to solve problems, 9% have attended town halls or other events. Whites appear to be more engaged than minorities. One of the questions these days is, what is the impact of social media? Does that mean you're participating, you're engaged in civic issues through social media? It's a question that remains to be answered. We'll also talk about the exit option and the protest option. The exit option, Californians move from one community to another because of policy dissatisfaction, whether it's traffic congestion, gang violence, or school issues. We see equity refugees, people who move to places that are more affordable, or ethnic refugees, for example, parents who pull their children out of ethnically diverse schools in favor of less diverse schools. And we also see the protest form of participation. We saw that with free speech in the Vietnam War protests on university campuses in the 1960s, the Watts riots in 1965, riots after the Rodney King verdict in 1992. Excuse me. And today we often see the protest option used with issues such as immigration and gay marriage. Now let's turn to public opinion. What is public opinion? It's the collective beliefs, attitudes, and values held by the citizenry. To political scientists, it's what people think about politics, public policy, and aspects of life that affect politics and policy. Elected officials can ignore, follow, or take the public opinion under advisement. In California, we have two major pollsters. I would invite you to take a look at these websites to get a sense of the polls they conduct and how they conduct them, the methodology that's used. They're the Field Poll and the Public Policy Institute of California polls. How is public opinion measured? First, straw polls. Those are generally educated guesses. They come through person on the street, website, or focus groups, either a very narrow group or an unscientific method. The other type is scientific polls. You will see them with the Public Policy Institute of California or the Field Poll, where they survey a relatively large number of people from 1,400 to 2,400 people. They use random sampling. That means every potential respondent has the same chance of being selected. They seek out those most likely to vote in many cases, and they seek to reduce or limit sampling error. And they try to ask the right questions. They try to gauge the intensity of how people feel, not just how they feel. That's why you'll see questions with strongly agree or disagree instead of just agree or disagree. Let's now take a look at voters and non-voters in California. Voters, the voting age population, that's those who are eligible to vote. In the 2012 presidential race, the voting age population in California was 24 million. 76% were registered to vote. Voter turnout is people who actually vote. Who votes in California? This is a survey that was done between September 2011 and July 2012. We see a slight edge in females. In age, 55 and older, 44%, a plurality. Education, about the same, with some college and college graduates. Let's take a look at race and ethnicity. Whites make up 66% of voters. Only 16% are Latinos and 7% blacks. Party registration, Democrat 44%, Republican 35%. Starting to see some trends here. Whites vote more in the race and ethnicity category, and more Democrats are registered to vote. Ideology. Liberals 32% and conservatives 39%, but middle of the road, is 28, and that makes them very important voters. People who own their home, 75% vote. Those who rent, 25%. You look at the annual income of people who vote, $80,000 or more family income, 42% of those people vote. Let's look at the regions. LA region, 1 out of 4 voters in California are from the LA region. 21% are from the Bay Area and 16% from the Central Valley. Let's quickly take a look at those who cannot vote. There are structural non-voting, people who are under 18, non-citizens, those who have moved to or within California within 15 days of an election, current prisoners and parolees, and those who are mentally incompetent as determined by a court. To register to vote, you can register at the DMV, County Clerk's Office. You can register to vote online at the Secretary of State's website, and there are also voter registration forms at various public places. There are those who won't vote for personal factors. People say politics is controlled by special interests. Why bother to vote? Candidates don't speak to me. It's hard to sift through information. I'm too busy with work and family, and issues are too confusing. There are also some structural factors. Some people view higher level education elections as more important than lower level elections and tend to not turn out for low level elections. General elections have higher turnout than primaries. In some cases, you have incumbents who are running unopposed. That impacts who will vote. And minority-majority districts. In districts where minorities are the voting majority, they're more likely to turn out to vote compared to districts where minorities are also the voting minority. There are also some regional factors. You see counties with high numbers of Latinos, immigrants, and other low-propensity voters. They tend to experience lower voter turnouts. In the 2012 presidential elections, for instance, we saw an 87% turnout in Marin County, only 64% in Merced, which has a high number of Latino, immigrants, and other low-propensity voters. The long-term trend is that we will be seeing a declining turnout. Let's now take a look at elections and campaigns in California. In California elections, you have primary elections. That's where voters choose the party nominees to run for office in the general election. In California now, in races for state or congressional offices, we have the top 2 primary, where candidates run on a single ballot and the top 2 vote getters run in the general election, regardless of party. Statewide, primaries are held on Tuesday after the first Monday in June in even-numbered years. General elections, that's where the primary winners face off to determine who will win the position. They're held the Tuesday after the first Monday in November. The governor and legislature may call a special election, such as the recall of 2003 with Governor Gray Davis in the election that gave us Arnold Schwarzenegger as governor. How are campaigns run in California? They're run by professionals. In candidate or proposition campaigns, you have campaign managers, fundraisers, media experts, and lawyers, accountants, technology experts who understand complex campaign finance regulations and fundraising. You see media specialists who divide California into media markets, not simply districts. They try to tailor a candidate's appeal to geographic, demographic, and ideological differences. And they also are responsible for putting together the TV ads you see, both positive and negative. Do these campaign professionals make a difference? We saw in the race for governor in 2010 that Republican candidate Meg Whitman hired 56 consulting firms and lost. It's not just the professionals who make a difference in campaigns. Other factors include incumbency, party strength, policy issues, candidate's personality, and the media coverage given to the candidate. Let's talk about where candidates get their money. The wealthy can self-fund. For instance, Meg Whitman spent $141 million of her own money in the 2010 race for governor. You raise money through direct mail, the internet, or other grassroots efforts. But the largest source of campaign funds for legislative and statewide candidates is political action committees, or the election arms of interest groups. How are the campaign contributions monitored? Political Reform Act of 1974 requires disclosure of campaign contributions and expenditures, limits entertaining by lobbyists, and prohibits conflict of interest by local officials. Fair Political Practices Commission, that's the commission that monitors all federal elections, issues advisory opinions, and conducts random audits. The FPPC also investigates charges of wrongdoing and fines candidates and organizations. Proposition 34 of 2000 established contribution limits and voluntary expenditure ceilings for candidates. You can see those limits on this slide. What we've seen is to get around the limits, the candidates and interest groups form independent expenditure committees. Those are committees that can raise money to help in campaigns, but can't coordinate directly with the campaign itself. Finally, let's talk about some of California's electoral gaps. We actually see two Californias. We have a richly diverse population on one hand, but a much less diverse electorate on the other, and we see that the gap between voters and non-voters is growing. Segments of California's population that are increasing the most are reflected in the electorate the least. We see race and ethnicity gaps. Whites make up 66% of the state's likely voters and are only 23% of those who are not registered to vote. However, Latinos make up only 16% of likely voters and make up 59% of those who are not registered to vote. We have an age gap. Younger voters are less interested in politics and less likely to vote than older voters. We have a partisan gap, real ideological differences on issues such as same-sex marriage, immigration, and global warming. We have a gender gap, the margin of difference between the opinions and votes of men and women. Some people are asking if these gaps are subsiding, and there is some evidence that they are. A couple of factors they point to are the declining percentage of whites in California's population, and ethnic and racial minorities are now entering the middle class. They're entering a level where they are more likely to vote. Please use this lecture as you prepare for your weekly quiz. Good luck.